Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been much discussion in this committee about the issue of regulatory abuse, the growing administrative state, and the role ATF plays in this undermining of our representative government. This has been discussed through the pistol brace rule, among others, but I want to make it clear that this is not a new issue and that the ATF and the entirety of the administrative state continues to engage in illegal lawmaking. Director Dettelbach, are you familiar with the case Cargill versus Garland?
I do know that case. I believe that's a pending case in the Fifth Circuit.
Yes, it's a case that was decided in January of this year, and it relates to challenging ATF's bump stock rule. Now, you have repeatedly stated that the ATF only carries out the laws as passed by Congress, but that isn't true. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, in fact, ruled against the ATF, and I'm just going to cover a few of the findings that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals made. This was initiated by a gun owner in response to the ATF promulgating a regulation to interpret federal law, specifically the National Firearms Act and the Gun Control Act, to define firearm accessories as machine guns, even though Congress had not done so. The regulation was pursued in direct contrast to a position that the ATF held for over a decade, and that's in fact similar to the pistol brace, where the ATF actually issued letters to owners of bump stocks and pistol braces saying that they were legal accessories. Yet the ATF eventually changed their mind, but not because Congress issued any new law. It was a new interpretation on your part. In fact, the court in the Cargill case found that that there had been bills that had been introduced regarding bump stocks, but before they could be considered in earnest, the ATF went forward with this rule, quote, short-circuiting the legislative process. The Fifth Circuit further concluded that even if the ATF interpretation of the statute were correct, the rule would clash with the rule of lenity because, quote, it purports to allow ATF, rather than Congress, to set forth the scope of criminal prohibitions. Director Dettelbach, does this situation and the legal questions raised sound familiar to you outside of the scope of the Cargill case?
That the rule was promulgated during the prior administration. It is currently in the courts. The circuits are actually split. And
right. The Fifth Circuit and the Sixth Circuit ruled yesterday, finding again that the ATF did not have the legal authority to issue the bump stock rule,
and
correct?
another circuit has upheld it, and it is on certiorari before the Supreme Court.
I understand that. My point is that what the ATF did with the bump stock is very similar to what you're attempting to do with the pistol brace rule, isn't it?
Those are different situations. They are both applications of Congress's.
Well, that's not what the court. That's not what the Fifth Circuit found, though, is it?
Obviously, this is before the courts. Our position has been in hundreds of pages of public documents.
And neither did the Sixth Circuit.
I will tell you, with respect to bump stocks, I fired a bump stock, and I will tell you it is impossible to simply fire one round. Impossible.
So it's a pretty scathing indictment if the ATF's attempt to subvert the lawmaking authority of Congress by misinterpreting statutes so that an unelected bureaucrat can essentially alter the underlying statute and apply new criminal prohibitions. This bump stock fight began in 2018, and many of these rules we are examining here began after the 2020 election. The common denominator is the weaponization of the ATF by unelected bureaucrats who are always pushing to expand their power and the scope of federal gun laws to infringe on the Second Amendment. However, your agenda becomes even more dangerous combined with this administration's anti-gun views, which is pushing to infringe on our Constitution and our natural rights. Director, who elected you to expand and rewrite the scope of federal gun laws?
I'm appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate.
You haven't been elected by anyone, is that right?
I do not stand, I'm not a politician, and I don't run for office.
Mr. Dettelbach, is your priority as ATF director to catch criminals who violate the law or to change the laws to create new criminals?
We use the laws as Congress has passed them to try to protect people from violent crime and catch people who are violating the law, murderers.
How is your regulatory agenda accomplishing that goal?
Because when Congress passes a law that Congress determines advances public safety, like the National Firearms Act, the law has to be implemented by somebody. It has to be enforced by somebody. law enforcement officials like myself and the brave men and women who work for me do that. We do that in a variety of different ways.
Congress didn't pass a law banning bump stocks, did it? Just answer my question, yes or no. Did Congress pass a law banning bump stocks,
Congress
yes or no?
delegated to ATF rulemaking authority.
Congress's actually, the courts held you don't have rulemaking authority. That was the Fifth Circuit decision.
And it's before the courts now, and of whatever the decisions of the courts are, we will abide by, of course.
Did Congress ban pistol braces? Yes or no?
Congress passed the National Firearms Act and said short-barreled rifles were subject to additional regulations. And
Chair recognizes Mr. Fry.